The question is that this bill now be read a second time. I give the call to the member for McMahon.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, this is a budget, of course, which is unravelling before our eyes, a government which is united in its disunity as it tries to sell this atrocious budget. It's a budget which is being comprehensively rejected right across the country. And I'm sure coalition members in the week that just passed, as they went back to the electorates, got the message loud and clear from their electorates just how bad this budget is for the people they represent, and it is now up to them to stand up for the people they represent. Instead of giving speeches like we just heard from the member for Right, he could actually represent his electorate and stand up for his pensioners. Instead of claiming falsely that there are no cuts to the pension, he could actually stand up for the pensioners in his electorate, as all members opposite could. He could stand up for the schools and hospitals in his electorate which have been cut, which the Premier of Queensland knows have been cut, but which the honourable member seems incapable of realising have actually suffered a cut in this budget. Schools and hospitals, cuts to family payments, freezing people out of New Start to create an underclass in this country. These are the measures, Mr Deputy Speaker, which are being comprehensively rejected around the country. The trashing of the fundamental principles of Medicare, one of the great institutions of this nation which Labor created and Labor will fight to defend. And it's all very well for the member for Right and other members opposite to say that $7 is not much for members of his electorate and people around the country to pay to see the doctor. But the universality of Medicare and the universality of health care is a fundamental principle which members right across the country should be defending and which members on this side of the House will defend. Will defend in this House and in the other place, and will defend right around the country. And members on the other side can come in. They have a choice. They can come in and stand up for their electorates, stand up for people who should have the right to see a doctor, to take their children to the doctor free of charge, or they can stand up for their Prime Minister and Treasurer. They can't do both. They can't do both, Mr Deputy Speaker. They must decide. Are you for the people in your electorate or are you for your government? Because your government is launching an attack on people in your electorates. And we've seen the government, and we saw another example of it just then, scrambling, Mr Deputy Speaker, to defend this budget, scrambling in an Orwellian attempt to deny that these fundamental changes in the budget are not broken promises. These verbal gymnastics that we see from the Treasurer in particular, trying to say that these doesn't represent a fundamental breach of commitment to the Australian people. There's two big problems with this budget, Mr Deputy Speaker. One is that it shows that this government was elected on a web of willful and consistent and systematic deceit, making false promises to the Australian people about cost of living, false promises to the Australian people about the state of the budget and being able to return the budget to surplus without new taxes and without spending cuts over and above those which had been previously identified. A web of deceit which the Liberal and National parties engaged in up until and including the September election, which has now been exposed by this budget. But also that it is a fundamentally unfair manifesto. And again we saw the Treasurer's spin at work on the weekend. The leaking of Treasury analysis, which apparently showed the impact on families was not that great, was not that big. Nothing to see here. Treasury told us, according to the spin from the Treasurer over the weekend. Well, there's only one little problem. It was not Treasury analysis at all. Not Treasury analysis at all. This is a Treasurer who said when coming to office, I will never leak Treasury advice to defend my position. I'll always stand up for myself. Well, I've got to give him this. He's not done that. He's invented false Treasury analysis. He's not leaked the real stuff. He's invented false Treasury analysis because it doesn't exist.
Order. I'd ask the member for McMahon to withdraw that accusation.
Why? On what basis, Mr Deputy Speaker?
It is a reflection on a member. I'd ask the member to assist the House and withdraw.
I'll withdraw. The fact of the matter is that there is no such document in existence. There is no Treasury analysis. It does not exist, Deputy Speaker. And this allegation that this document, which has been released to the media, is Treasury analysis is patently false. It does not exist. That is a statement of fact. It doesn't exist, and we have a pattern of behaviour here from this Treasurer, who sneakily releases these documents and claims they're Treasury analysis, and then when further questions are asked, it turns out it's written in his office or the Prime Minister's office, not down at the Treasury. Now, the Treasury should not be politicised in this way, Deputy Speaker. The Treasury is a fine institution. which has served the people of Australia well for 114 years, and it is not the political plaything of this Treasurer, and he should not take their name and politicise their name in an attempt to justify his atrocious policies. If he wants to defend his policies, he should stand up for them and not claim that he has Treasury analysis which does not exist. If the government wants to do little spreadsheets on the back of an envelope in their office and work out little false calculations and release them, that's up to them. But stand up for them. Admit to the Australian people what you're doing. Now, the fact of the matter is that there is analysis of this budget, and it's by NatSem, a respected modelling outfit, actually been referred to by the Prime Minister as one of the most respected economic modelling outfits in this country. And the evidence is very stark. Of the 100,000 families in the lowest quintile, they will see $43 cut from their weekly budgets every week. If this is your idea of cost of living relief, well, next time don't bother, I say to the Prime Minister and the Treasurer through you, Deputy Speaker. If this is your idea, remember the Prime Minister standing in that dispatch box and said they were riding to the rescue of the Australian people. Well, don't turn up next time, Deputy Speaker. This is what happens when you ride to the rescue of the Australian people. A sole parent with an income of $55,000 with 2 kids, one in primary school and one in high school, will face a $20,000 hit to their budgets. By just 2015, this family will face a 10% annual hit to their current family income of more than $5,700 a year. Now, a couple on a single income of $75,000 with 2 kids, one not yet in school and one in primary school, will face a $2,000 decline in family income annually in 2015. And by 2017-18, this family will have $7,400 less income than they otherwise would have had prior to this budget. They're the facts, Deputy Speaker. I don't need to leak Treasury analysis, which does not exist, as the Treasurer seems need to do. I'm happy to stand at this dispatch box and defend the analysis, which has been commissioned by the opposition, by a respected economic modeller. We'll do that, and the Treasurer should have the courage to do the same, instead of leaking analysis which does not exist. And Ben Phillips from NatSem has stated today we'd estimate around 1.2 million families that would be on an average around $3,000 a year worse off by 2017-18, whereas the top income groups, so the top 20% of households, would have no impact or a very small positive impact, So that's what the independent analysis shows. That's what the documents which we're prepared to stand behind show, that have been released publicly and transparently. Let the Treasurer pick a hole in. Let the Treasurer come in here and find an error, and let him argue that out with NatSem, those respected modellers. He's not prepared to do so, Deputy Speaker. What he does do is engage in an Orwellian rhetoric and releases to newspapers documents which are claimed to be Treasury analysis, which are clearly not. And, of course, as I said, Deputy Speaker, this is a budget which has been rejected right across the country, not only by people in communities, by premiers, by state treasurers, who are outraged, rightly, at their treatment by this government, the arrogant treatment of this Prime Minister and this Treasurer of the elected premiers of this state. Now, I don't have universally positive views of all the premiers, but they are people of accomplishment, and they do not deserve to be treated this way, and the states they represent do not deserve to be treated in this arrogant and off-handed way by this Prime Minister who says they should be grown-ups. That's an insult to the state premiers and to the states they represent. And we saw Mike Keating, a respected former bureaucrat who's had to deal with some very difficult issues, deliver some very difficult policies in his time. He says that, and I quote, "This government has cut the bottom rungs of the ladder of opportunity." The bottom rungs of the ladder of opportunity. And of course he's right about that. Because what we see here, Deputy Speaker, is a fundamentally unfair document. A fundamentally unfair document which the Treasurer and the Prime Minister don't even understand. They don't understand their own policy. We saw the Prime Minister last week in a public relations triumph go out and blitz talkback radio right across the country, getting basic facts wrong, telling university students that the cuts wouldn't apply to them when they clearly do, because they were going to start university next year, that they wouldn't apply to them when they clearly do. We saw the Treasurer claim that the GP tax wouldn't be paid by people with a chronic illness. Wrong. Just plain wrong. He's on a roll. Deputy Speaker, just plain wrong. If the Prime Minister and the Treasurer don't understand the policies they're introducing, why should the Australian people pay for them? And of course we saw the Treasurer in the budget papers not include the tables which have traditionally been included in every single budget since 2005 on the impact of their changes on families of different incomes, showing how fair the budget is or otherwise. Peter Costello did it, Wayne Swan did it, certainly in economic statements under Treasurers since 2005. Those things have been included, in budgets in particular. But it didn't occur in this budget. And the Treasurer was asked about this. He said, "Oh, that's just not right. You can't believe everything you read in the Sydney Morning Herald." Well, the Sydney Morning Herald is not the one with the credibility problem here, Deputy Speaker. It's the Treasurer who's misled the Australian people here. It's the Treasurer who's produced a budget which, very conveniently, the budget documents don't include those tables because they would show just how unfair this budget is. And you've got the situation, we just heard it again from the member for Right, saying Australians should make these contributions and these tough decisions and make these payments, for example the GP tax, to get the budget back on an even footing, to get it fiscally healthy and sound. Well, there's only one problem with that, Deputy Speaker, apart from the fact that it's fundamentally unfair and a trashing of the principle of universal health care. The $7 GP tax doesn't even go to the budget bottom line, it goes to a new fund. Such is the budget emergency that they can trash the universality of Medicare and not even use it to return the budget to surplus, but to create a new fund to finance health and medical research. Now, who would disagree with more money for health and medical research? Nobody would. But the cures of today should not be paid for by taxing the sick of today, and nor should the cures of tomorrow. Now, the member for Right and other honourable members should recognise that this GP tax is not being used to return the budget to surplus at all. And these are the priorities and the values judgments of this government. The other thing they're doing, of course, is introducing an expensive and extravagant and unfair paid parental leave scheme, sending cheques of $50,000 to people who may be millionaires to have babies, Deputy Speaker. Well, budgets are about priorities, and this is the priority of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, saying to people, if you're under 30, we can't afford to put you on Newstart. If you're a pensioner, we can't afford to index your pension fairly. If you're a family, we can't afford to let you go to the doctor for free. If you're a family on a low income with a single income, we need to take money off you. Oh, but if you're a millionaire, we can send you a cheque for $50,000 if you have a baby. These are the priorities of this government. This is what this Prime Minister and this Treasurer are foisting on the Australian people, and I suspect foisting on all those members opposite, who don't actually support this policy but don't have the courage to stand up against it. Stand up against this extravagant policy, which shows the warped and twisted priorities of this government. Now, a budget is about choices, and this government's made them. This government's made the choice to harm Australia's pensioners and, despite the protestations of the member for Right, to take money off them. Because if you introduce unfair indexation, you are taking money off Australia's pensioners. To say to Australia's families, we will take money off you because we're going to charge you to go to the doctor. To say to Australians, we are going to take money off you by forcing an underclass of those people under 30 and denying them any benefit when it comes to Newstart. These are the priorities and the values of this government, while sending cheques out of $50,000. $50,000, taking money away from single-income families across Australia's cities and regions and rural areas. Now, there's members opposite I know who know the impact of this, who know the impact of these family tax benefit changes and how bad they'll be right across the country, in rural and regional areas as well. And what are they doing about it? Well, they can do something about it. They can come and sit on this side of the chamber and vote accordingly, Deputy Speaker. They can actually have the courage of their convictions if they've got them and stand up for their constituents. They can actually stand up against this government and this Prime Minister. They can roll them on the paid parental leave scheme. They can sit on this side and do the heavy lifting with this side of the House when it comes to defending Australians who deserve a better budget and a better government than the one they've got. Because the Australian people have seen the values of this government over the last fortnight since the budget was delivered, and they don't like them. They don't like the values of this government. It's not the government they were promised. It's not the government they deserve. They deserve so much better, Deputy Speaker. They deserve fundamentally a government that is honest with them, that is upfront with them, which tells them before the election how much money they're going to take off them, instead of the false and misleading systematic campaign that the Prime Minister and the Treasurer masterminded before the election, and the fundamentally unfair manifesto which is this budget, which takes from people and gives to others, which gives $50,000 cheques to some but takes away $20,000 over the next 4 years off others. These are values which the government is welcome to defend, but we will fight. And we will fight in this place and the other place and across the community because it is an unfair budget.